From simple to complex, Michael Schwartz has tried history-making cases, as well as cases that involve issues that affect us all. Schwartz's Law presents legal solutions and legal overviews. Schwartz's Law interviews the headline makers and gives you a close-up look at today's controversial topics. Enter Michael Schwartz's courtroom for expert interviews on current events and past issues.
Hello, I'm Michael Schwartz, and this is Schwartz's Law. Last week we had a very lively discussion about the city and some of the concerns that we have about how the city has been going and maybe what's going on with the population within the city. And it was so good that we decided we're going to continue on with it because we really couldn't get it all in at one time. So back again we have Minister Malik Shabazz and Reverend Horace Sheffield. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And last time we were talking, I think, Minister, you were talking about what you felt was the key to the city in terms of diversification, integration, and things of that nature. If we have a city that's worth having, it's got to be a city that has something to it. It's not enough to simply say, all right, we've got a whole bunch of land, half of which may be vacant now, and we don't have the ability to properly protect the citizens who are within this area of land. But a city is more than just buildings and land and
the
people scattered around. It's a community, it's a sense of belonging together. It's an allegiance to the concept of community. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
Okay, so how would you propose that we achieve that?
Well, I want to say I agree with my brother, Reverend Horace, about needing integration. I'm all for it. We're all human beings. There's one race. We should all be able to get along. But by and large, let me make this perfectly clear. The problem has never been African Americans getting along with white folks. It's been white folks getting along with African Americans.
Well, wait,
can I prove it? Look at the world history. Look at any nation on earth and look right here. It's that, and that's the problem that too many of our white brothers do not want to have. We want to have certain little racial conversations, and you stay in this little area, but we don't really have honesty, and in lacking the honesty in the dialogue, the problems never get alleviated. Black people are hurting and been hurting and have been subjugated, and we're tired of it. We want relationships with our white brothers and sisters, economically, politically, socially, culturally, and whatnot, but we're tired of being junior partners, silent partners, and slaves. We're going to be equal, or there will be no damn relationship, and that's the bottom line.
Well, here's the deal. Here's the deal in terms of my vision of the city. And what I'm saying is, obviously, Minister Shabazz, there's some people that if Detroit was the most prosperous, clean city in the world, and it was still majority black, would not want to live here. But I traveled all over this country, and the cultural inducements, the enticements of some of those cities where you can go and see things and do things and educate your kids well is what makes a healthy city. And I'm simply saying, when I talk about, you say keep using the word integration, I'm saying we've got to create an appeal for our city where that kind of culture exists, where there are good schools, there are wonderful things to do. Number one thing about this town is the way it looks. It's certainly rooted in our industrial past. You have large areas where factories have been abandoned for 30 years that are still standing. It's not aesthetically attractive. We've got to clean that stuff up. We've got to find ways to have things in our city that are appealing, that look aesthetically attractive, that draw people. That's got nothing to do with color. The average person I know wants to live somewhere that is clean, safe, competitive, and has all the cultural competencies, and they don't want to have to lose their life to do so.
And I'm agreeing, Horace, but every time we move to do just that, we end up gangstered. Take over the schools.
Well,
let
me just add one. Let me just add one.
You know that.
Yeah, but let me add one point that I forgot about all that, which is the most important part of all this, because you know my dad always said to me, because they called him a champion of the poor, never have a Wall Street mentality in a blue collar town. I don't think we as African Americans, the mayor and other folks, have taken ample responsibility to find out how do we lift these people up. How do we educate them? How do we find ways of retraining? Because they came here in hopes of high-paying wages with low skills. And some of them have stayed in that mindset of low skills, but now get low wages or government assistance.
Or no wages.
So the automobile industry's gone, but we have a workforce, by the way, you agree, Mr. Schwartz, by and large have been trained. I mean, these people have technological industrial savvy. Let's find a way to put these people to work.
Exactly. Now let me put it to you this way. You know a place called Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh was very much like Detroit. It was a big industrial town, had a large minority population. It was going into the same place that we're going now. Something happened though. I mean, they had a steel industry. A lot of that steel industry went off to India or China or God knows where, and they were left with a shell of what they had. Yet, they've turned that place around. Now, question, which we'll get back to after we hear these words, is, what can we learn from Pittsburgh, where they turned their city around from some place that was going into oblivion into some place which is now a very good place to live? And how can we use the lessons of Pittsburgh, which is very similar to Detroit, so that we can improve our city?
Absolutely.
But we'll be back after these words.
There has to be this confluence of all interested parties and seen as equals without distrust, and saying we have to together, white, black, city, suburban, find a way to resuscitate Detroit and to transform it.
All right, we're back on Schwartz's Law with Reverend Horace Sheffield and Minister Malik Shabazz. And Minister, we were talking about your statement about burning down the city. What were you trying to actually say when you said that?
This is white supremacy, and we will fight you. And before we let you take over our city, we will burn it down first. It's a metaphor. I was speaking out of pain. I was speaking out of anger. I was speaking out of frustration of 500 years of global oppression.
It's more than 500 years. It goes back 1,000 years or more.
Yeah, but in specific, the last 500 years globally. I'm a student of history, not black history, not white history, but world history. And I know what has been done. Everywhere the black-white dynamic exists, the white is on the top and the black or the dark is on the bottom. On every nation on this earth. I'm thinking about chattel enslavement. I'm thinking about genocide. And I'm thinking about the last hired, first fired. I'm thinking about Harriet Tubman. I'm thinking about Malcolm and Martin and Medgar. I've got all that on my mind. I'm thinking about Coleman Young, the best mayor we ever had. I'm thinking about all this. I'm thinking about the state of Michigan helping us with Recorder's Court and taking over our court system. I'm thinking about the state of Michigan regionalizing our convention center, Cobo Hall, and the first thing they do, they throw Simon's Pizza out, a profitable black business. I'm thinking about the state helping us with the school system, where we had a $93 million budget surplus, $1.5 billion bond issue, and almost 200,000 students. And I'm looking at the mess that 10 and a half of the last 13 years of state management through state-empowered school board, super-empowered CEOs, Robert Bob and Roy Roberts. And I'm looking at all this, and now here comes the state again. Want to help us by taking us over because we're broke, yet the state owes us money. If you pay us our money, we will not be broke. So I had war on my mind, but I'm a man of peace, and I'm a lover of Detroit and of Detroiters, and my record is of peace. You will not find any record of me being violent, but it was a metaphor. But I spoke with that in mind, and I predict, unless there are changes on Mack, on Elmhurst, on Woodward, on Finkel, Tyrone, Shaniqua, who've already been cut off cash assistance. Shaniqua got 4 children. She's been made homeless through this governor's policies. I am predicting, unless we make some changes and have some more humane policies put in place, Detroit will blow. But not only Detroit, cities across the country will blow.
Well, there's no question in my mind. I mean, I agree with you that when the black people came to the United States, they were brought in as slaves. The slavery, though, started in Africa because they were enslaved by others.
Not
Yeah,
so.
but
Not
they're-
so.
they're- they're-
Not
Well,
so.
we can
And-
get
and-
into that
no,
later.
no, and there is no word before the rise. No, let's deal with the facts, sir.
There was no
There is
slavery.
no word in any African language, over 1,000 different languages, for slavery before the advent or the rise of the European. That is not true.
Yeah, but
That's
let's
a lie.
let's
Let me
bring-
just say
let's-
this much. The
go ahead.
Europeans did what they did, but they were assisted in doing that by others.
Well, there's
within
no
there.
question
So,
that people act in their own self-interest.
I will
Brother
just
Schwartz.
say this.
With the introduction of gunpowder, there's always been tribal disputes, which then led to an escalation and the marketization of our people for human capital purposes. I agree with Brother Malik. Let me just say this. I issued a statement. I tried to call my brother, you know, because I love Malik.
And
Malik,
thank you for that statement.
Yeah, me and Malik get along well. I think he might have been better served. I know what he was saying. He was really saying, I represent the aspirations of folk out here who've been languishing over an open pit, an abyss of agony. And I think you'd have been better served, I can tell you, if you said that I'm not going to do it, but I know Shaniqua and Tyrone will.
I'll say it here.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm
So-
not,
And
I'm not
that's
for the
different.
record.
Yeah.
I'm not
And
going
I-
to burn.
Yeah,
any-
and I have no doubt.
For the
I have
record.
no doubt that you would. But here's the point that I think is important. This and in my statement, I referenced J.L. Hudson, who said to my father at the Randor Hotel in '67 November that the reason the riots happened because they were listening to the wrong Negroes. And my father said, no, the reason the riots happened not because you listened to the wrong Negroes, you didn't listen to the ones you're talking to. Now here's the point. The point is people try to tell folk what's going on. He's acquainted with the pulse. I am. I got a young lady in my church in her house for 2.5 weeks with no heat, no lights. Children got to go to school. People do desperate things when they're facing desperate circumstances. So I think what he's saying is, given an avalanche of agony, an accumulation of all the grief, that there's the potential, just like it was in '67, for some spark, something to occur where these people have been pressed down, beaten down to explode. And that we ought to be thinking about that in the context of our conversation, that we don't take away something from people that leaves them with absolutely nothing.
Right, because what
And
happens...
in the context of government policy.
Right.
What happens when people are left with nothing is you'll take people who are normally law-abiding people who
Right.
would never think of doing anything wrong, and they have two choices at that point. One choice is go into a dark hole
Right.
and just die.
Yes.
And the other one is to go out and do what's necessary to survive.
Let us not
And
forget-
sometimes necessary to survive means that you will have to take power unto yourself and get what you're not otherwise able to get, because your choice is very stark. And I think that's what you're telling me. And I think most people who may not have experienced that personally can understand that
Well-
when given the choice between having nothing and no way to get it legitimately.
The choice between being killed or fighting to live.
Right.
Claude McKay said it best, if we must die,
Go ahead.
let us not be led to slaughter like hogs. I mean, the reality is, and I don't think people understand, Brother Malik and I both work every day trying to eliminate the amelioration of this agony. I mean, interceding for people. But I have never in my life seen what I see going on in Detroit today. I mean, there is a seething rage. And there's a sense now that people believe that someone else is responsible for what I'm being forced and coerced to endure.
That is, well, I will
That's
say
true.
that is true that they feel that way. I believe they have a justification for feeling
Right.
that way. But most people will never blame themselves. Not to say that they should
But
blame
Michael-
others, because I will say this much. They're in the position they're in, not of their own making. All right? They're in the position they're in because of things beyond their control.
Michael,
And
let
when
me
you
say
take
one
somebody-
thing about that real quick. I and Brother Malik believe in self-responsibility. I will be the first one to say to you that there are choices that people have made that either created or worsened their conditions. But what I have a problem is when the powers to be, the power structure, the economic order suggest that they're solely responsible. I may be responsible for where I am, but I need some help getting out. And then you see the government bailing out the city, you know, the companies put the world on wheels and ran out of gas, but we're told to go solo fide by yourself.
Well,
something wrong with that
The problem
picture.
you've got is when you have people who, for example, need public assistance, and you tell them, oh, you've had it 4 years, now we're making this law, and right now you've had it for more than 4 years, you're immediately off, and then as you go along, others are immediately off,
But there's no job for you.
and there's no job, and there's nothing that you can do. Somewhere along the way, somebody in government has to understand why government exists, because if government doesn't exist to protect its own citizens, it has no
That's
reason
the fundamental
to exist.
question that we have to answer right now, and if you hear the rancor coming from the Republican Party, they're saying let's go further away from being
All right,
responsible.
well, I say right now, let's go to our sponsors.
Okay.
And we'll be back after these words.
White folks in general only want to accept black people that do not have an ounce of courage.
Detroit needs to be integrated. Detroit needs to have a plethora of people with different perspectives, and because they don't agree with me, it's fine. I mean, it's big enough to accommodate all of us.
All right, we're back on Schwartz's Law with Reverend Horace Sheffield and Minister Malik Shabazz. And Reverend, you're talking about the Republican Party. I got to tell you something. I'm looking at all these people who are running on the Republican Party. The one who keeps on saying things different from what he said last week and the week before and the week before that, who disowns his own creation of health care in a state where he was the governor. That is supposed to be leadership? I don't think so. I've got another one out there who's got some kind of weird ideas about what people are and who they are, because he's got tons of money. The man's a millionaire. He doesn't care about those people who don't have the millions. They don't count him. I don't even know if he thinks that they're really people. And then you've got this other person who's a congressman from someplace in Texas who needs a reality check. And the last one you got is a college professor who turned into a multimillionaire by acting as they call these people, I call them influence peddlers, but they have a word for them. They call them lobbyists. It's a nice way to say influence peddler. He made millions of dollars by being an influence peddler. Now, all these people have some weird idea of what being a human being is, because they live in a rarefied atmosphere. None of them seem to understand what it's like to have to struggle every day just to exist.
I think right now the question that we're trying to answer, and they have a different answer than us obviously, is the same question that needs to be asked about Detroit. Who's Detroit? Who's America? The problem that I have with the Republican Party is the suggestion now that somehow or another this is white male, rich white males America, as opposed to poor working class people or others who work every day to contribute to the largesse of this country. Same question in Detroit. Who's Detroit? So we have an organization around a principle that somehow or another white men have lost their status, and that if we don't do something quick, fast, in a hurry, black people, brown people are going to take over our country. I was in D.C. a couple weeks ago, and the cab driver was showing me T-shirts, white T-shirts where the White House is black, and it says a black man in the black house, and we've been whited out. That's a pretty serious T-shirt. And he's saying that's the popular sentiment around Washington, D.C.
Well, the problem that you've got is that everybody is looking at it from the wrong perspective. It's not, is it white, and it's not, is it black? If you're going to keep on doing that, you're setting yourself up for a division that will last in perpetuity. Rather, we ought to be saying, hey, we're all in this together.
But they don't care about a division, Michael. They have the military.
No,
on
they
the side.
have a division. See, they are persisting in a
But the
division.
divisions and the segregating and the separating was done before we got here.
Yes.
Of course, we're all human beings. There's one race.
Right.
The human family.
Correct.
But we didn't do that.
Right.
No offense. Your people did that. We have to
yeah,
deal.
seriously,
We have
sir.
to deal in the
Sir,
cars.
my people
Well, his
weren't
people-
in-
his
my
people-
people
his
weren't
people
even in
suffer
this
from-
country.
white
His
people
people
did
suffer
it,
from the same
and white
thing.
people benefit from the separating and the segregated. The bottom line is this.
But it's not color now, it's class.
It's about
class.
colors within that.
Color
This
is used
country
to
was
subjugate
built
the wrong
off
class.
white supremacy.
It's used to subjugate the wrong class.
And capitalism and genocide. And not only this country,
But Malik-
all the Western
But Malik-
white European powers
Malik, though-
who have hegemony
Yeah.
over the darker peoples of the
Sure,
earth.
and-
White people are 9% of the
Yeah.
world's population.
Yeah. I
7.1
understand that.
billion
And we live in
They're
a-
9%.
Yeah.
And Malcolm asked the question
Yeah.
50 years ago, and it needs to be answered now. How can so few white people
Control so many?
misrule
Yeah.
so many black people?
Yeah.
That's a question.
And I know
that needs to
we
be
have,
answered.
and it's still neo-colonialism and all that. But what I'm saying to you is,
And it's here.
I don't discount hegemony and hegemonic and all of that stuff. What I'm saying to you is, my perspective is a little broader, and probably because of my trade union background and the struggle that I saw, my grandfather and father waged to organize, where people in the factory who were non-unionized, the polls were against the black. Is that it's a bigger picture. They use race. They use all of these
agree.
things as further ways to subjugate people, so that ultimately it elevates the class people they think are entitled to the largesse of the nation and of this country. And that's why they're concerned about Obama and everybody else, because they see themselves as losing the political means to control the economic
But the
infrastructure.
problem in Detroit is largely based off of our population, a black problem.
Right.
I know we got class. I know that some of the poorest people around
Right.
are my white brothers and sisters
Right.
in the Appalachian Mountains.
Right.
But we're talking about a
Yeah.
Detroit,
But
Lansing
the issue,
problem.
but the issue in Detroit is the same question: who's the mayor? It's who's Detroit. Right now, what's going on in Detroit is defining whose Detroit is it going to be.
Well, it should be
And,
the
and,
people's.
and that's why people want to eliminate certain people from the city. They want to shrink the city. Everything is about who ultimately will live in Detroit and who ultimately will control Detroit. And that's the conversation that's being had by people who don't look like us, although you and I have access to certain circles of folks in this town that some may not. But there are people like the Dan Gilberts and others who are sitting down right now saying, where does Detroit need to be and how do we get there? And trust me, one of the major things I've heard, and I've heard it, Michael, out of people's mouths that appall me, is that the problem with Detroit is it's too black and too poor, and we got to do something about both those
Well,
problems.
here's
And
the
I
bigger
say the
problem.
People need to unite, get together, organize, and make the powers to be
Yeah.
feel us, hear us, and see us, and let them know we are the majority, and it's a new day. Business as usual is over.
All right, Minister, let me ask you this question, because my view is that the key to Detroit's being revitalized is bringing in business and having more employment and bringing back people to the city, without which all the things you're talking about be interesting,
Sure, we
but
want
they
that.
won't make a difference.
I agree.
Sure, we
So
want
the
that.
question I have for you is this: what do you propose to bring in business and bring people back to the city?
Well, I'm not the mayor. I'm not the mayor.
I'm not asking
I'm
you to
not
be the
the
mayor.
council.
Right.
I'm not the governor, because if I was, the farce that I just left on my way here from city council and the economic subjugation and the tyranny that's being placed on our city wouldn't be going on
Right, but those
if
people,
I was.
those people don't even answer the question that I put to you. They're not even
I-
talking
I'd
those things.
love
What
to
I'm
answer the
asking you is, or Reverend
I love to
Sheffield,
answer, but number one thing is we have to stop isolating ourselves. I mean, it's an attitude. We have to want other people to be a part of our city, welcome other people. Number one issue we have in Detroit, well, two things. Number one is crime. I mean, the reality is people don't want to live anywhere that's not safe. I live in University District. We have our private patrol. There are people of all hues that are moving back into that area, and for it to be safe is important. The second thing, of course, is the school district, which Malik has been very involved in. People want to have a place to educate their kids. They don't want to pay high taxes and have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to educate their children. The third thing is we got to be competitive. People shouldn't have to give, it shouldn't be a pig giving a ham. It should be a hen giving some eggs to live in this town. But, when you think about the redlining, which is really illegal, we pay more for insurance than anywhere else in the country. I mean, these are the things that have to be addressed if Detroit's going to be better. But the number one issue is we've got to develop this sense that, okay, Detroit needs to be integrated. Detroit needs to have a plethora of people with different perspectives. And because they don't agree with me, it's fine. I mean, it's big enough to accommodate all of us.
And Rev, I think that black people, when we say Detroit, when we move outside of Detroit, Detroit's a code word for black.
Right.
We all know that. Adolf Mongo said it's another word. We know what that word is. I think black people welcome white people. That's never been the problem. The problem has been and I'm generalizing, white people welcoming black people and accepting black people as we really are. White folks in general only want to accept black people that do not have an ounce of courage. If a black man has one scrotum that works and he has the testicular fortitude for that one scrotum to swing low, white folks get upset. They get frightened.
All right, well, let me say this.
Hold that hard on.
Time out.
Hold that hard on for a
Hold
minute.
on to it a minute, because obviously this is something that requires us to go to more than one program.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do right now is we're going to hold where we are. We're going to come back next week. I want all of you in the audience to stand by, because we're going to ask you to come back next week. And we'll be back with Horace Sheffield and Malik Shabazz here on Schwartz's Law.